Hey everybody, how's it going? I thought I would do different, just for difference sake. In today's astrology classroom episode, we wanted to talk about finding vocation, career, looking at all. That was the third from the top on the survey that I did in July, and looking at a person's vocation or career is interesting in astrology because most of the time, when I get questions about this, people, kind of mix things up in a way they shouldn't be mixing things up. I get sometimes people asking questions in readings, what's my passion? I can't tell you a person's passion. I can't tell you what speaks to your soul. And I think it's important to just own the real topic of the question. Where we're asking about a good vocation, a good career, we want something, yes, that's going to make us happy, something that we're going to be good at, but a lot of the times people are afraid to just admit that they want to know where they're going to make their money. And that could just be because of a stigma. Hi, Rainbow. That could just be, pressure to feel like you need to be doing something that conveys a sense of meaning. Well, the thing is that, yeah, that's true, but what you're passionate about, what your calling is in life, what your spiritual calling, a mission, a karmic purpose, whatever, may have nothing to do with how you make your coin. If your calling is connected to being able to raise the kid who cures cancer, or, to end a cycle of family dysfunction, or to improve your neighborhood so that something can flourish down the road and emerge from that new environment, those are all wonderful purposes and laudable goals. And those may have nothing to do with what you do to earn a paycheck. A lot of people have a tendency to get really caught up looking for passion as profit, and not always are you going to find passion as profit. So let's get down to business. What do we want to look at in our astrology chart that can tell us what is a good vocation to go into, again, where are we going to make our money, and what is supported and what's not supported? There are three main places, or I guess you could say houses or house rulers, that I take a look at right away when a person asks, what should I do? Where should I be going? Am I in the right place? A lot of the times I've actually had people, funny enough, already on the right path. They're just not happy with the location, maybe the corporation, that organization that they're working for that is providing it for them. And so what I've kind of noticed is that that can be something that can also be discussed in in the reading or in the chart exploration. So the three places that I would look at first are houses 2, 6, and 10. Okay, 2, 6, and 10. And the rulers of houses 2, 6, and 10. Now, we've talked about an overview of the planets, and we've talked about an overview of the houses in previous videos. So, if you're not up to speed on that, this is going to feel like we're kind of jumping ahead or we're leaving some stuff out. But I want each of these videos to feel like they're providing something new, not just rehashing old info. So, I'll make another archive list of all the videos that I've already put up so you can kind of bounce around and do your research. So looking at a person's houses 2, which is the area of employment, they're going into their salary, okay, their profits, this is their values, all right, especially the material values, material wealth. House 6 is service to the world. We talk about reputation, we talk about scheduling, we talk about productivity. House 10 is how we make our mark on the world, leadership, promotion, profit, and upward mobility, and prominence. Okay, so those are the big three. Those are the big three. And usually what I'll do is I'll pay attention to what sign is ruling each of those three and see how that kind of plays into what they do. A person who has, say, Virgo as the 6th house ruler probably would do well to consider something in either the health field, medical profession, or, Virgo can also be a very strong sign for organizational improvement. So we're looking at things like marketing, account managing, accounting itself. Sometimes we see people with Virgo as a 6th house ruler also go into areas where they are perhaps actually dealing with things that are quite meticulous, like, say, law. Other signs that also favor that kind of activity would say be Capricorn, of course, as well as to a certain degree, possibly even Leos, Leo energy ruling the 6th house. 10th house can also give us an idea of how that person is going to ascend through that work. Okay, so if a person's 10th house is ruled by, say, Cancer, like mine is, then a person is going to most likely ascend by means of teaching, nurturing, encouraging growth, working on facilitating growth. I don't do just readings, I also teach. I also work on cultivating things, helping to make people kind of not just have the material, but know what's going on behind the scenes, help them to learn what I know that helps me do my work. So part of my work is not just having the answers, but also sharing how I, how I come about them. Again, showing people what's behind the curtain and nurturing and giving that kind of growth through educational means. Sometimes it's about healing, sometimes it's about, just cultivating awareness there. A person who has, say, Aries, or perhaps, again, going into Leo, or maybe even Sagittarius, a fire sign, is the ruler of the 10th house, might go into his place where they are talking about growing things, propagating things. Again, this could go into things like advertising and marketing. This could go into public relations, PR, maybe education, okay, campaigning. All right, they might be doing that for their business, their corporation. They might be performing those duties. If Scorpio is the ruler of the 2nd house, say like it is in mine, you tend to see a focus on things that are a bit more, well, let's just say, off the beaten path. Okay, my business is off the beaten path. When we think about astrology, tarot, the occult, spiritual practice, Scorpio energy is all about that. Scorpio is one of the leading rulers of that. And so you can see a lot of that going on in my chart as far as business is concerned. So my employer, I guess you could say, is not, it's me, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But my employer, or the company I work for, I guess you could say, would be something that actually kind of functions in that capacity. Scorpio is also another area that can talk about physical health, especially relating to, say, either sexual health. Okay, we talk about sexual reproductive health, so OBGYN, would be somebody who probably has Scorpio ruling either houses 2, 6, or 10, or perhaps Scorpio's ruler Pluto in either houses 2, 6, or 10. You may see that maybe somebody who's got their 2nd house being ruled by Taurus makes their money in things like agriculture, property, construction, all right, maybe something to do with food, nutrition, maybe some, so you've got to know your signs, and you can actually kind of plug it in. It's almost like a recipe for what we're looking at here. We talk about a recipe for a career. You look at all 3. So if we break down mine is a grand water connection. Not always, but most of the time you'll find that houses 2, 6, and 10, I'm going to say 3 out of 5 times you're going to have all the same element. So water, fire, air, earth. So mine are all water. So we think about the properties of water as well. Water is, to a degree, a very spiritual, psychic, empathic kind of element. It also talks about dealing with things that have to do with the unknown, working a little bit more on a side of either education, healing, nurturing, providing, especially in the ways of information. Not so much in the way of air, but with water it's about facilitating growth. It's about giving the opportunity for growth. So my 2nd house ruled by Scorpio, we're definitely dealing with more of that occult, we're dealing with more of the spiritual world. Pisces ruling the 6th house, my service to people. So Pisces is all about, mental expansion. Sometimes it's education in a higher but somewhat more esoteric kind of way. Higher education, spiritual, philosophical, cultural education. I probably could have ended up being a teacher. I wanted to be a teacher at one point. Actually, a lot of people don't know that before I went down this road, I actually, I did go to university you know, with the intention of becoming an English teacher. I just didn't end up getting the teaching certificate. So that could have also have been 10th house ruled by Cancer. So again, nurturing, bringing people into a space where they're not only learning but also kind of training, finding themselves at home, teaching people to swim in the water, so to speak. That's kind of a very interesting way to look at it. Now, to get more specific, we want to look at where the ruling planets of those houses are, and of course we also want to look at other financial planets, in particular Jupiter, Venus, and Mars, to give more indication of where this could fit in. Okay, now I've probably brought this up before, okay, and again, we're just using my chart as an example because it's, you know, it's the one I've got most memorized, and it can help you kind of, you know, roughly translate. When we talk about things like self-employment, okay, people often, you know, want to ask about self-employment and money and things like that. Jupiter is a place where we can also make money. So whenever I see people wanting to go into self-employment, work from home, be entrepreneurs in an entrepreneur sense, okay, not necessarily an independent contractor. That's a different thing. An entrepreneur and an independent contractor, an entrepreneur and a working artist, etc., those are not the same thing. So when we see, say, a person who owns their own business, who runs their own brand, who wants to kind of be their own, okay, in that respect, I like to see either Jupiter ruling or occupying houses 4, 8, or maybe 12. Now, in my chart, we have Jupiter in house 4, so that makes sense, right? Now, I may also say that this person could pull this off as well if they had either Venus ruling or occupying houses 4, 8, or 12. Venus rules house number 8 in my chart. So we've got a very strong, you know, link towards somebody being a boss, all right, of themselves. Somebody running their own brand, having a cottage industry, doing something out of their own home. If a person aspires to do that and they don't have that kind of planetary energy built into their chart, it doesn't mean they can't do it. However, usually at that point, I would be like, then before you go and launch this business, I want to see some support from the planets going into your chart here. I'd like to see Jupiter in either houses 4 or 8. You know, so you might wait a couple of years. Or I'd like to see Jupiter maybe in a strong conjunction aspect with the ruler of houses 4, 8, or 12. And that would be a good time for a person who doesn't have that in to get started on their business, so to speak. Some people find that while they want to work for themselves, they may actually still technically be a part of a small business, but they didn't originate it themselves. You know, and I tend to find that when Jupiter is, you know, either occupying or ruling houses 7, houses 3, maybe even occupying or ruling house 11. You know, so a person may aspire to go into their own business, but what they do is they actually join a partnership. And that can also be something that they play around with if they want to. So they may not be the sole ruler of their brand or their company or whatever, but they may be in a partnership. Jupiter ruling or occupying, or Venus ruling or occupying house 3 can indicate an independent contractor. Same with house 9, an independent contractor, or perhaps somebody who works on contract. And sometimes you see that with doctors, professors, people who may work on retainer, such as lawyers, solicitors, things like that. It gets kind of interesting when you look at that kind of thing, because a lot of people think of like lawyers and real estate agents and things like that as entrepreneurs. They're not entrepreneurs unless they own the whole office, right? They're not entrepreneurs. So a lot of people don't know that they're not entrepreneurs when they're doing what they think is entrepreneurship. And that's okay. We're just getting technical. We're just splitting hairs here. Go and be that realtor. Go and be that solicitor. You know, even if you're working for a firm or something else or a different brokerage, you didn't start. You're still your own, you know, you're still doing your own thing, working independently, but you're not owning your own business. So that's just a little spiel I wanted to do on self-employment, because that is kind of trendy as a question right now. And I definitely want to encourage people who want to go forward with their dreams to just know how to do it and know what's going on there. Another thing I would look for, again, we talk about the ruling planets of the houses 2, 6, and 10. Where are those planets? What are they doing? Okay, if the ruler of, say, house number 2 is in, say, house number 3, then that would indicate a person will most likely do work for, I guess you could say, a company or an organization that actually works in, say, vocational education. Maybe they're working to help out their local community. They're working in some kind of publishing capacity, broadcasting capacity, news, again, account management, contract management. In the ninth house, you might see a little bit of that as well, but also things working abroad. Both areas could be working online, dealing with communications, publishing. Higher education could be going into government, as well as academia. We tend to see federal government in the ninth house, local government, or small government in house number 3. We might actually see, again, legal work going on there as well. Houses 4 and 10. If the ruler of house number 2, 6, or 10 is in either houses 4 or 10, we may see somebody who is able to make money either working in property, especially if it's in house number 4, whether it's, as a landlord or doing construction, maybe interior design. Okay, design work can definitely be a big part of it. Maybe we might see maybe a real estate owner. Okay, working again as a landlord, making money in real estate investing. That could especially be strong if the ruler of house 10 is in house 8 or in house 4, because we're talking about investments just being a big deal all around. House number 5, we tend to see more work with children, relationships, okay, art, creativity. But, dealing with the arts in that aspect, I'm going to say right now, house number 5 is a tricky place when it comes to making money. House number 5 is a hard place to make consistent money, so, you might want to lean on another planet. It's highly unlikely that the rulers of houses 10, 6, and 2 are all in house number 5. Remember, we come into life with many different vocations that we could do that we resonate with. But house number 5, again, we have things working with either childhood, behavior work, behavioral psychology. A lot of the times with house number 5, there can be a focus on love and relationships. You might see a relationship counselor, a marriage counselor, somebody working with those kinds of, or maybe even support groups and things like that. Social work in house number 5, either rulers of houses 2, 6, or 10 in house number 5. But again, consistency is important, so see where the other rulers are. House number 6, we kind of covered already a little bit, but again, we're talking about actually working on organizational improvement to a certain degree, or perhaps even something to do with medicine in the field that we're looking at. Okay, especially, depending on what sign rules that house. House number 10, if the ruler of house number 10 is in house number 10, which is, a situation like what I've got. If the ruler of house number 10 is in house number 10, you have a situation where you're probably working for something that you are in charge of making sure, you're in charge of the visibility. You're probably working on the PR for that company, the HR for that company. You're doing a lot of things. Now, when you work for yourself, you are PR, you are HR, you are marketing, you are all of those things. So that makes sense in my chart. If your ruler is, say, Mars, and it's house number 10, again, we're still dealing with PR, but in more of a competitive sense. Maybe dealing with competitive work, competing with other companies, assessing competition, meeting competition, but also, again, rising through the ranks by promoting your company, your organization, whatever you work for, by assessing the competition in a competitive market. You're kind of the general of your company's army, whatever company it is. We talked about 9. 8 is, if you've got either houses 2, 8, or 10 rulers in house number 8, you're probably dealing with handling other people's money, other people's finances. You see a lot of brokers and accountants obviously going in here, sometimes attorneys. These can also be, however, where you're handling other people's affairs. You could be a caretaker in some way, a caregiver, caretaker, handling somebody else's livelihood. I've seen people with landscaping companies, have something to do with house number 8. Again, making money in investments, sales, stocks, things like that. That's also a big deal with house number 8. House number 11, we're getting into your NPOs, okay, your nonprofit organizations there. A lot of house 11 people tend to end up going into nonprofit organizations, humanitarian, environmental, anything to do with the nonprofit for the better good, socially responsible, social betterment type of focus, type of field. However, in a weird flip side, you can also see that people with, income house planets in House 11 can also get into, I guess you say more recreational types of industries as well. In fact, House 11, 3, and 9 occupying, if we go 2 out of 3, you tend to see folks also working in entertainment. This can also come from house number 5 as well. If it's, 11, 5, 3, 11, 9, 3, we see entertainment, especially actors, maybe people working in tech for entertainment purposes, video games, editing movies, things like that, all kinds of fun stuff. And, if there's also a big role here that can be talking, we could talk about, even a person making money down the road. It might not necessarily, a person can switch careers all the time, right? If you have, you may have 2 or 3 careers in your lifetime. The world has changed, and there's no going back. We don't live in a world where a person learns a trade at 18, 19, 20, and they keep that career until they retire. It's just, we don't live in that world anymore. A lot of people may reinvent themselves, a couple of times. One of my favorite speakers on mental health and one of my favorite comedians, Ruby Wax, is actually a good example of this. She used to be an interviewer. She used to write for French and Saunders, and absolutely fabulous. And she was, she did Girls on Top back in the 80s, for those of us who are old enough to remember that. And but then she changed, as we got into the 2000s. She decided to focus on mental health awareness, not only for her own sake, but for the public, and she reinvented herself, and now she's, actually, she's still very funny, but at the same time, she's got a different cause and a different sense of purpose. I'd love to get a hold of her astrology chart at some point, just because I think it'd be kind of ironic, because she's not really into astrology. But that's an example of people changing. You might see those shifts go on in a person's chart, especially if a major transitional planet, such as, say, Uranus or Saturn or Pluto, would transit the ruler of a person's either 10th, 6th, or 2nd house rulers. You may find that a person moves on to the next thing. You could have 2 or 3 different careers that you could really excel at. Again, being a teacher with Pisces could have easily been done with me. There's even a lot to be supportive of a couple of other things that I had gone. Jupiter ruled my 3rd house. A lot of people don't know, when I was in high school and going into my first year of college, I was actually getting set to go be a graphic designer and illustrator. Jupiter ruling the 3rd, that would have actually worked out okay. So there's a lot to look at there. There's a whole lot you can do. There's no one fixed vocation or what's best. So the best way I would recommend you go around actually, kind of envisioning these things, or giving yourself an understanding of how that all comes down or breaks through, is look and see, look and see what is happening when it comes to, the person's big 3, 2, 6, and 10. Okay, where are those rulers? You might isolate 2 or 3 career paths, 2 or 3 vocational paths. Okay, and then look and see what's going on with those planets, and then look at Jupiter and Venus, and you can kind of narrow down the roads a little bit. Don't narrow it down too much, though, because a good astrologer is not just going to look at what's built into the chart, but they're going to keep an eye on transits. I wouldn't tell somebody who, had that transition coming up, yeah, you should go be an actor, you should go be a musician. Pluto's about to cross your Venus, the ruler of your, of your 5th house or your 2nd house, so you probably won't do that for very long. No, I would keep an eye on a transit that's coming up as well. A lot of people, again, don't pay attention to transits. I did a video about that. That might be something you want to look into. Let's talk about house number 12, because I almost forgot that here at the end. House number 12, we talk about the past, right? We talk about privacy, hidden zone, things going on behind the scenes. However, the 12th house can also rule things like hospitals. Okay, we talk about isolation to a certain degree. You can see people working in the justice system, sometimes the penal system, or maybe not necessarily the penal system here. If they're, sometimes isolation can come from things like deployment. A lot of people who end up working in the military or, again, working in the medical field end up doing residency programs, trips, moves, things like that, where they are isolated because they are deployed. They are sent somewhere to work, so to speak. So, you may have activity going on in House 12 and House 9 that would say that, oh, this person's on a residency program as a doctor. So, even though she was born in Manchester in the UK, she's going to be, she took an international program. She wanted to go try something in another country. So she's going to be in Vancouver, Canada, or Portland, Oregon for the next 2 years. And that's her 9th house and 12th house turning on. Or you may find out, yeah, this person is in the military and, they're going to go on deployment and they're going to be there for, the next 6 months while Jupiter's in that area. There can be a lot of focus on isolation, but not necessarily in a bad way. Sometimes it's just something that's there. You can also see with the 12th house, again, going into the past, digging up the past, you see a lot of museum, types in there, historians, sometimes, again, teachers, researchers, scientific researchers, academic researchers, things along those lines also tend to come up in house number 12. So I hope you guys found this helpful. I hope this gives you a lot to chew on, a lot to think about when it comes to looking at vocations, looking at industries. There is no such thing as a planet that's going to tell you the name of the company that you're going to end up working for. But again, it's more of a recipe. It's a bit more complicated than people make it look. But again, part of my job with the 10th house ruled by Cancer and the 6th house ruled by Pisces to show you what's going on behind the curtain. If I were a computer repair guy, you'd probably hate me because I'd make you sit there and watch me fix your computer while I pull it open. But you take care. And you all enjoy this, and I'll be back with another video very shortly because this is just the first of the couple I'm going to be recording today.